Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. When the days were completed for their purification according to the law of Moses, the parents of Jesus took him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, just as it was written in the law of the Lord. Every male that opens the womb shall be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer the sacrifice of a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, in accordance with the dictate in the law of the Lord. Now there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, awaiting the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he should not see death before he had seen the Christ, the Lord. He came in the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to perform the custom of the law in regard to him, he took him into his arms and blessed God, saying, Lord, now you let your servant go in peace. Your word has been fulfilled. My own eyes have seen the salvation, which you have prepared in the sight of every people, a light to reveal you to the nations, the glory of your people Israel. The child's father and mother were amazed at what was said about him, and Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be contradicted. And you yourself a sword will pierce, so that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. The Gospel of the Lord. Today is the feast day of St. Thomas Becket. Sometimes he's called the most famous martyr of the Middle Ages. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury in England and was martyred in the year 1170. There's a pretty well-known movie about him called Becket. Has anybody ever seen Becket? It's based off of a play called Murder in the Cathedral, I believe, if I remember correctly. But anyway, St. Thomas Becket, there's a couple of interesting things about him. First of all, his basic story was he was a very well-educated man living in England, and so he ended up working for the Archbishop of Canterbury, and when King Henry II came to power, he was recommended by the Archbishop to work for King Henry as a very high-up person in his court. I believe the Chancellor was the exact position. And they became pretty good friends, and they worked closely together. And eventually King Henry had a desire to kind of impose his will on the church in some ways. And he thought, what better person to appoint to the Archbishop of Canterbury than my servant Thomas, who's been working with me for these years. And Thomas begged him not to do it because he realized that after becoming the Archbishop, he would be forced to refuse many of the things that Henry was going to ask for. So it's a good reminder to us of the power of the office of the bishop or of a pope or a pastor. All of us need to take those offices seriously. St. John Chrysostom has a famous quote that hell is full of bad bishops and bad priests. So it's something to, when you start to criticize your pastor or your bishop or your pope, just always keep that in mind. They have a tremendous responsibility, and they will be judged for it at Judgment Day. So St. Thomas Becket is a great reminder of that. Also, St. Thomas Becket is significant in world history and in church history because he's one of those people who helps develop a doctrine of how the church should relate to the state in church history. Many of us know that here in the United States, a very, very strong catchphrase is people say, we need to make sure that there's a separation of church and state. And what exactly does that mean? In our modern age, in the United States, mainly imposed by many political elites, I'm convinced. It's pushed by an agenda. But many of us just take it for happenstance now that separation of church and state means that the church needs to stay out of public conversation. Whatever you want to do in your churches and your private life is fine. But don't bring your religion into the public sphere. That's the common understanding today. That's certainly not the understanding of the church, and it also wasn't the understanding of the founding fathers of the United States either. They believed that the separation of church and state meant that the state can't impose a religion on anyone. So whatever religion you want to practice in the United States, the state can't force you or persecute you because of that religion. But that never was meant to mean that the church doesn't have a role to play in society, and that people can't bring their religion into the public conversation. For the obvious reason that no matter what religion you hold, every person is religious. Someone who is an atheist or an agnostic, that is their religion. That is their religious point of view. It is impossible to remove religion from public conversation and from society. Now, another thing the Founding Fathers thought about religion is that it plays a great balance to hold back governmental tyrannies. And they took this from the teaching of the church, from the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, again, a misconception that some people have is they think that the church ruled society, like the Pope was the king or the emperor or something like that. It wasn't the case at all. In the Middle Ages, you had all of these different kings and all these different governments and states and nations, and the one thing that held them all together was the Christian view of the world, which meant that every king knew that he was ruling like a tyrant. He would be called out for it by the bishop or by the pope. And it was a way of making sure that governors and kings had to promote just laws and just rules. It was a balance of power. In the United States, when the Founding Fathers developed the government, they spoke about the balance of powers. They borrowed that from the Middle Ages. And the Founding Fathers of the U.S. never intended for the church not to play a significant role in society. John Adams, a famous quote, he said that the United States Constitution was specifically written for a moral and religious people. If the people becomes immoral and irreligious, the culture will crumble. So St. Thomas Becket is a great reminder of this. And I think our culture and our society desperately needs to recover this. As Catholics, we've gotten too used to just being timid in the public sphere. We're afraid of people bashing us with that separation of church and state statement. We need to be adamant. The church has a significant role to play in our culture. And if the church does not play that role, havoc takes place. A great example is World War II. Many people say, why didn't Pope Pius XII, why didn't he speak out more publicly against Hitler and the Nazis? Well, why didn't he do it? Because he doesn't really have that power anymore. In our modern secular culture, he could speak out publicly all he wanted to. But what difference would it have made? And so instead of speaking publicly, he did a lot of different private acts trying to rescue persecuted Jews who were living in Italy around his territory. The church definitely has a role to play in society, and St. Thomas Becket is a great witness to that fact. A man who shed his blood, gave his life for the protection of the church against the imposition of tyrannical governments.